the time to join us for our webinar today on best practices for building SharePoint Intranet. I'm super excited to have Augustine and Louise with us today to walk through some best practices. During this time, we've got some Q&A, so please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A section. We will be sure to, circle back with those at the end of our session. But drop some chats. We look forward to interacting with you via polls during this session and look forward to sharing some tips and tricks. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Augustine.
Thank you, Courtney. Everyone, very nice to have you here. I'm very excited to be hosting this, and it's been a long way in the making, and we're excited for what we have to share with you. This webinar is going to be about best practices to build your intranet in SharePoint, and the marketing line there's in weeks, and that's our promise today. We have Luis here, who's our SharePoint guru, and he's joining us from Inside View Global, a partner company that has been working with us for a while now in these type of projects. I'll let Luis say hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Agustin. Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. Yes, basically, we've been working for the last few months together in a few projects, a few migrations, replatforming organizations from moving from old intranets to the new intranet. So we decided to put this together in a way to share our experiences, sharing with you some tips and hints of what to do. We are from Inside View Global. I'm a CIO. So I'm very happy to be here with you guys.
Excellent, Luis. Great to have you. Folks, we have a lot of content to cover today. Our session is going to take us to about the top of the hour, including Q&A. So we have about 50 minutes of content. This session is going to be recorded for your reference later. We'll be sharing the link with you. And as Courtney mentioned earlier, we're going to have, we ask you to please submit your questions in the chat if you like, or wait until the end and we'll open up the mics and let you ask away. I think you're going to find the content quite compelling. Before we move on, I'm going to ask Courtney to publish a little poll that we put together. We just want to find out some of your preferences for this content. And so if you don't mind, you may choose any one of these options and more than one if you like. So tell us, how would you like to use this time? What would be the most useful for you today? Courtney, you let me know when it's time to close it.
I think we're good. We've got 11 responses. I think that's pretty strong.
Excellent. Excellent. So it sounds like the majority of you are interested in tips for user adoption for intranets and also practical steps to develop and roll out your intranet, followed by how to structure the intranet to make it more secure and functional, which is great because we have a lot of those things today, folks, to share with you. So we look forward to sharing more. Thank you very much for your input. We'll move forward. Okay, today's presentation is packed with content, as I was saying. After this brief intro, I'd like to review now our goals. So we're going to start off with a quick sort of baselining as to why should we consider an intranet in SharePoint. I don't know about you, but I know that there are some organizations that are doubting, is SharePoint the right platform for my intranet? And some are very much committed to SharePoint. So they're even some of you who are in the line here, I know that you already have invested in SharePoint Intranet. So we'll cover some of the whys. Then we're going to move to a framework to understand the what to use when. What we find with many clients is that people are still very confused as to how they what are the options for file storage and collaboration in Microsoft 365, and how should they all come together to form a cohesive digital workspace for employees. So we're going to show you a framework that we like to use to explain to users what to use when. And then we're also going to show you, and Luis is going to show you in actual in a demo how that all comes together in an intranet. We are going to be doing a demo that's going to be a big part of this presentation, and we're going to walk you through our deployment steps, our recommended deployment approach. One of the key things that Luis is going to talk about is that these days you don't need a long project to roll out an intranet, and that's, I think, what is so exciting about this. And then we want to talk to you about intranet governance and user adoption, because as I will say later, with SharePoint, there's a lot of flexibility, but in that flexibility, also the need to put some guardrails in place and then do an effective adoption campaign for your users. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And towards the end, we're going to leave you with some really good resources and links that you can use to get started as soon as you want. All right, unless there's any questions, I'll move forward. So our goals today will be to demonstrate that you can create a fully functional intranet in a matter of weeks, and we're going to share best practices with you. I also want to remind you of some common pitfalls that people make and how to be prepared for them. Okay, so we're going to be reviewing best practices, but also some of the gotchas, if you will. All right, a little bit about us before we begin. We are, as we said, we're a partnership, and we bring, I think, combined about 25 years of SharePoint and Microsoft 365 experience. And I'm really excited to work with Luis and his team because they bring something that is essentially something that we don't have, which is a deep expertise in all that has to do with Microsoft technology in a more technical way. In our case, Change Champions, we are focused on user adoption, education programs, and of course, intranets are a big part of this. So we're excited to partner with Luis and his team. Luis, over to you.
Thank you, Agustin, and likewise, it's been a pleasure. For the last 15 years, in our experience, we sometimes underestimate the value of change management, and this is why we work better together. We complement each other. So on our side, we are also a Microsoft partner. Our principles actually goes about listening to the organization, to people, working with them, and leaving this technology as a second. Why? We found that actually when we talk about an intranet, it's more about what employees, staff, people are looking for, and that's why we are here. We have Microsoft Azure certifications, Scrum certifications as well. We are basically they're trying to get the best for our clients out of the Microsoft investment they do. Thank you, Agustin.
Thank you, Luis. Super exciting, folks, to have Luis on board. He brings a ton of experience in his team as well. Folks, we want to talk to you a little bit about what you should consider an intranet in SharePoint. These are our top favorite reasons. You may know others, but in our opinion, these are some of the highlights, if you will. Number one, when you invest in SharePoint, in an intranet in SharePoint, you're really truly realizing the value of your Microsoft investment, right? What's the point of paying a product or a license when you can build this in weeks, literally in weeks? In fact, nowadays with SharePoint Online, you can really create an effective design that looks very slick. And as Luis will show, that's actually how we begin our process, is by presenting clients with a proof of concept from which they can make some decisions from the get-go. All right. So SharePoint has come a really long way from the days of SharePoint Classic. And today, really, you have a number of options from templates to web parts to configurations that will help you create a SharePoint intranet again in weeks and without the need really of relying on your IT team. The second aspect that I like to always point out to clients and people that I work with is the beauty of having your SharePoint or your intranet in SharePoint is that it offers a lot of native integrations with other Microsoft 365 apps without the need of coders or developers or anything fancy, right? This will really allow you to create a more cohesive experience for your users. For example, you can integrate your intranet with Microsoft Teams, or you can integrate it with Viva Engage, or even users can move files from their OneDrive to their intranet when they're ready. There are also exciting opportunities to even Power Automate in your intranet as well as Power BI. So Power Automate maybe to create workflows and automation, Power BI for reporting, right? So all in all, when you are creating your intranet in SharePoint, you are really truly, integrating all the other services into the mix. Which I think makes it a much better experience for the user as well. Number three, in our opinion, SharePoint intranets really support the most common use cases. I mean, we've worked with some organizations that have very specific use cases, like, for example, news targeting, or the ability to get users to subscribe to things that they care to see. Well, that's all possible with a SharePoint intranet. There's some tricks here and there you have to apply, but it's not difficult to do, and it's very much possible. You can also bring communities if you like. You can bring forms. You can bring automation and all that. So really, from the most basic things such as news and maybe content centralization, all the way to content targeting and search. All those use cases you're probably thinking about can be met with SharePoint. And last but not least, one of my favorite, folks, is the ability to integrate both what we call collaborative content, that is content that people are constantly changing and working on, and publishable content, or content that is essentially to be consumed by the rest of the organization. You can integrate those two types of content in one single platform, right? So the beauty of SharePoint is that because at the end of the day, everything is stored in SharePoint, it allows you to bring those two spaces into a single place, which again, to me, it's improving the user experience and the flow from one thing to another. Unless there's any questions, I'll move on, folks. If you do have questions, please post them in the chat. We'd love to hear you. And we will come back to this concept of collaborative content in just a minute, but I wanted to point out that is definitely possible, and we'll show you how. Now, speaking of content and where should we store things when we talk about an intranet? I think this is one of the most common questions I see. I'm sure you've seen this in your organizations as well. There's a huge confusion out there as to where should I store my files, essentially, right? And this is a common framework that we've developed that we like to share with our clients, and actually we use them in training sometimes so that they understand the Microsoft ecosystem a little bit better. So we essentially look at it in this way. When you think about Microsoft 365, you have, in essence, three types of collaboration spaces and storage spaces. On the left, you have OneDrive. OneDrive, essentially, folks, is your Microsoft 365 storage for what we say individual files, right? So they're personal files, files that by default are owned by a specific individual. We call those the me files, right? So if you look in your OneDrive in Microsoft 365, you notice that everything is private unless you share it. And that to me is a good indication of what kind of content goes there. So in essence, is files that pertain to you and they're just yours for the time being. In the middle there, in this middle part, you have what we called the collaborative spaces. And the collaborative spaces basically are places where we can connect and collaborate with our colleagues. These spaces can be in Teams or in some organizations in SharePoint. Organizations that have chosen Teams, they like the Teams format, they like the app and how it works, and the idea of being able to post in channels, so they use Teams for that. Some organizations, they still like their document library view, they like the SharePoint look, so they may have chosen SharePoint, right? Point being is, this is the we space. So this is the place where we come to collaborate in our teams, but it's still a rather private space because the work that we do here is not work that we want to essentially broadcast across the organization, right? That's why we call it the we place. And examples of files that would go here would include things like meeting notes or maybe department-specific files that are not meant to be shared with the entire organization. Maybe there's an approval flow that works behind the scenes here. So this we space, again, is rather private, but for group collaboration. And last, we have our intranet, which is also built in SharePoint, but it leverages a slightly different type of SharePoint site that we call a communication site. And we'll show you this in a moment here. And as such, this SharePoint site, communication site, is meant to really broadcast information and is a place to share content that informs and engages everyone in the organization, right? So the way I look at it is your intranet is really the place to post information like news or policies, or maybe links to resources that anyone would care to see. Maybe there's a manual, like an onboarding manual and such, right? In many organizations that we work with, the two columns here, the we and the us, the publishable stuff and the collaborative stuff, tends to be, if you say, confused. And sometimes there's people working in this space on the intranet. And as a result of that, IT and others, they tend to put restrictions on what people can see. And then users end up in places where they can't access content, right? And so it's disengaging because I'm trying to browse through and find information, and suddenly I run into a place where I cannot access, right? What we're going to show you, and Luis is going to show you in just a second here, is how to come up with an architecture that brings these two together in a single place in a very neat way, in my opinion, and bridge the gap again between what we consider to be our collaborative files, the stuff that we're working on, and the intranet files, or the publishable stuff. Any questions, folks, on this? And I'll pass this on to Luis now to demo for us.
Thank you very much, Agustin. Thank you for the great intro, because with that context that you share with us, then I can commence sharing my screen to commence with. So what we done, as Agustin was sharing over the years, I guess we have tried to come up with an approach, because an intranet could be one of those projects that could be taking a lot of time. And one of the first things that I notice that takes the longer is when we do the design, because there are too many gaps and too many questions to answer. For instance, where I'm going to store my document, what type of document I'm going to put in the intranet, how I'm going to integrate all of these applications that exist within my IT department for CRM, for communications, for news, for newsletter. I found that some organizations, they are using emails to send news back and forth. So I found as well organizations, they have been using the intranet in an organic way, meaning that there are many sources of truth for the same document. For instance, the same policy could exist in multiple shared drives or in OneDrive or G drives. And the idea of having Microsoft is to maximize your investment. And having said that, while I was basically presenting and putting this together, I realized that we have a very common example that most people use on a daily basis, probably more than before than now, which is a newspaper, right? And the newspaper is an instrument that actually gives us the chance to share the communication, the news, and it gives us a different layout depending on the topic of what we're talking. Could be finance, could be looking for a job, could be ads, and also the most important thing is the landing page of the newspaper. So let's translate that into an intranet. And that's the first goal. The internet should always be there to communicate and also to find the information in a few clicks. So you probably, most of you seen quite a few intranets, and there are too many ways of actually putting together. For this demo, we're going to focus 100% in SharePoint, Microsoft 365. And I'm going to start first with highlighting, I guess, the key elements. The most important part is the navigation. And this is one of the first tips that I'm going to share with all of you guys. Instead of focusing on how we're going to store the documents, let's think about how we're going to get to that documents. Because this is an approach that we used in the past, and it always speed up the design. Why? Because we are basically visualizing how we're going to get to the end. So this navigation that you see is a consolidation of multiple intranets, numerous exercises, a lot of brainstorms with many departments, divisions, sectors, including countries as well. I've been to Australia, to Canada, to the United States, and I've been implementing quite a few intranets, including the content migrations. So this is very generic, because the idea of this is actually to share what we do as part of the approach. We call it rapid deployment, because we are basically reinventing or bringing a new way of doing these intranets. Instead of going through the traditional mockups or the wireframes, we do that, but in a dynamic way. The main, I guess, reason is, as you can see the navigation here, one of the key questions that always get asked is, especially from key stakeholders, is, hey, Luis, how do I know what type of content? I have no idea what an intranet is, or I have no idea how it's actually going to look like. And I need to see something visual. So we are resolving that question with this dynamic walkthrough or click-through, which is quick and easy, and is deployed within days once we establish or engage into the project. That's what we call it, the rapid deployment. The first thing is the navigation, as I was saying. The section is always, without having to go into the world of the internet website, but more internal. What do you want to share with your organization, with your team, with your staff? Then we have a section for news and events, which is a central repository for all your news. Mainly because every department, every corporate, every site, every region, most of the times they want to share news. News about successful project completion, someone has joined the organization, and multiple other events like training events, Christmas events, or you name it. So the first thing that we have to resolve as well as part of the intranet is how we're going to actually put together all these communications coming from different departments into one single place, because we don't want the user to go and visit every single department. We want them to go and see one place so they can actually find the news that they are basically targeting or they are looking for. And if I got enough time, I'll show you some of the great features from SharePoint, which is audience targeting. I have it ready, so I'm gonna keep moving. So based on what Agustin was sharing with us in the previous slide, this is one of the, I guess, over the years, key answers that it's been a lot of work to actually come up with this approach. Because now, as you know, we have OneDrive, we have Microsoft Teams, we got SharePoint, and there are too many actually elements and on the table. Actually, what are we going to use, right? When we do the intranet, some of the questions that we get asked is, what do we use, SharePoint or Microsoft Teams? Our answer is actually go to SharePoint, because it's a content that is, you want them to be there. You want the content to grow. You want the content to be always visible and in real time. So in this navigation, I'm going to make emphasis. There are two columns, the departments and the collaboration workspaces. The departments and the rest of is part of the rest of the intranet. But this is answering the topic that Agustin was sharing, which is us, the intranet. Why? Because we give a space and we give a proper place for the departments to actually share the news, to introduce what they do, to share the team, to share calendars, to share the quick links. So whoever wants to go, for instance, to business development, as I'm going here, then they will actually see the landing page of the business development. The first thing that is going to come, a very abstract or summary of the team, who are part of the team, the most important things that are actually going to find within the department and the site, and as well some quick links, a quick agenda to the upcoming events within the team. And this is consistent across the rest of the departments. And this is a second tip that I'm going to add here in this demo. Governance is important, is a key in this intranet. And Agustin is going to talk deep into this topic, because it's very important that you plan the governance and not only plan the content structure. And the tip number 3 is as well, information architecture has to be designed in a way a governance can be fit around. So the rest of the stuff, and something that I learned years ago when I was in Australia is an intranet is a place for the employees, but most importantly to the employees to find data. And how they're going to find the documents and information is through a search. However, the search needs to be descriptive, needs to be tagged, needs to be having elements that the user can actually use to the benefit to find the information quick and fast. Sometimes we underestimate the time that the employees take to actually find documents, but when you put together all the time that it took over the year, it's a big number, and I'm talking about probably 4 hours per employee. If you multiply that, it's a high cost for the organization. So that's why the intranet is so important, to actually make it very efficient from the design. So I put together a quick example here for the business development and how to tag documents. And the main reason why I'm showing this is because I want to show the power of the search. So this link is going to take me to a document library, which is the information for the business development. Let's hypothetically say that they are sharing a policy within the department and it's official content. So they're going to be targeting this document as the business division. In this case, I'm just assuming this is business grow, and the document type is a marketing collateral. It's a policy for that. So once the policy is official, and maybe it's a PDF, maybe you know whatever type you need of information that is important for the organization, we tag and we add it to the document. Microsoft 365 and SharePoint itself have its own crawling mechanism to actually index this content, similar to when you use Google. When you go back to the intranet, you're going to find a link at the right-hand side, which is the search center. The end user doesn't necessarily has to go to the department. The only thing that they need to do is actually go to this landing page. And in a couple of clicks, let's say I'm looking for the department for the policy for the business grow, and I apply my filter similar to a Google experience, then you have it. So you have now the document they are looking for. They can use as well a different refiners. And the important part of the search center as well is about showing the type of data classification the organization is driven for. In this case, I'm also looking for people, let's say. People are going to give you a distinctive, different type of search where you can actually find the right, basically the right stuff. You can use as well a different layout. These are tools that are actually quite easy for anyone to implement. On the left-hand side, at the moment, just to show you a different layout, I don't have any refiners, but you can add, for instance, the department as a refiner. You can add the job title as well. And having said that, I'm going back to the employee center, because you can also use the navigation as to show the important links within your intranet, right? This topic is one of the most important and traditional and common tasks or ask within an intranet. Where I'm going to start my policies and procedures and my forms. How I'm actually going to find them. Well, we present the same layout. If you see what we done here, we went from the search, having a very consistent layout. We went to people finding, and then we went back to the policies. And you can see actually the layout is similar. What it means to the employee and to us and the intranet and the end user, it just means that the training is actually easier. The user adoption is going to be faster. So the intranet, you don't really have, or necessarily will have to retraining every day, because you keep in the consistency. And that's what I was sharing. The key is the governance that we're going to adopt. So I'm going back to our teams, because now I'm going to introduce how we actually close the gap from the intranet to the collaborating step. So this is the collaboration workspaces. And how I'm going to start this one? Well, the departments and the collaboration workspaces are basically a gateway, because for the departments, you are basically inviting users to find content, but who is going to create the content? Of course, they need to have every collaboration, or every department will need the collaboration workspace to store content. Could be internal, could be external, or could be actually projects that you share with different teams or different departments within the organization. So in this case, the layout is completely going to change for two main reasons. When you go into in the mode or on the mode of actually starting or creating content, you have, or you're wearing a different hat. In this case, you don't really are focusing on finding content. You want something that is practical. You want a navigation that helps you to create documents and start sort of working on them. So on the left-hand side, then we take advantage of a different template from Microsoft SharePoint Online, which is the Microsoft Teams. What you saw before is a communication layout. Now we are in a Microsoft Teams, so we keep maximizing the use of SharePoint. So on the left-hand side, we have the navigation that you can customize to add links to anything that you need that is important for your team. And on the right-hand side, we keep using a portion of the navigation that is from the intranet. Because we are basically at the same time unconsciously removing any distractors to the user, so they can actually focus on doing the work. The collaboration workspace is basically just 3 SharePoint sites connected together to give us another tip that is important for us: plan your information security as much as possible, because it's important moving forward and for the future of Microsoft Copilot as well. So what we're doing here is we got 2 sites for internal and 1 for collaboration and 1 for external. The external is important to emphasize why we have an external one. There are many common requests that the organization needs to share content with other organizations outside of the company. And this is what we invite the end user to use it for. So they can actually copy and move any content in the external site. So security doesn't affect the rest of the organization, and we dedicate a space to tighten the security. So they actually don't have access to any other resources that could include sensitive data. As I'm going short on time, actually gonna go back to the slides. Agustin, probably you wanna share your screen. So actually, I'm gonna share with you how we actually put this together.
Thank you, Luis. I'll jump in the slides. I just wanted to show something that I think folks is.
You're mute, Agustin.
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me there? No.
Yep.
Yeah. Luis, can you hear me there?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to reinforce something, folks, for you on the line. Luis, if you go back to our teams, one of the things that I think is critical here, folks, is for those of you who may be already in intranets, or those of you who are maybe thinking of moving to an intranet, this is a really common issue that we run into. Is that, again, as I was saying earlier, in the days of SharePoint Classic or maybe file servers, people have the collaborative stuff in a file server, and then maybe some things in the intranet somewhere else, or maybe in the worst case scenario, they have them all mismatched on the intranet, and it's difficult to understand what's what, right? What Luis is proposing here is really a clear differentiation between intranet as files, which is the ones on the left, and we files, which are the ones on the right-hand side of that column. Within the we, he's also suggesting 3 sites, which are 2 sites for internal collaboration, for a different type of collaboration. And Luis, if you don't mind just clicking on one, just so that I can reinforce that point. Under our teams, if you look at development workspaces, I just wanted to point out that navigation, how it changes, and you can see it at the top there, collaboration workspaces. If you click on the top for 1 second again, to me, this is critical, because now what you're doing is bridging the gap for the users, right? And giving them a nice, neatly navigation to all their stuff, whether it's internal or intranet, as well as things that they can use to collaborate externally. And the permissions are set to the specific sites that were created to create this architecture. Just wanted to reinforce that. I think it's really, really neat.
That's great. Before you share back your screen, actually gonna show something quickly.
Go for it, Luis. I just accidentally clicked on share. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Because when I was starting the presentation, I was talking about the news, and the news I have in the screen at the moment. This is my account, which is Luis, but I also have another account with me, which is Lydia. So let's bring Lydia to the conversation, because Lydia is just as well part of the organization. However, she sometimes don't want to see everything. She just want to see actually something that is for the department. So you will see that the content that you see on the left-hand side, the news, is not the same as for Lydia. Why? Because the content basically is just targeting what is important for her. So we have 3 news that is Design Our Intranet, monthly newsletter, and new initiative announcement. While for Luis, we have Adopt AI, which is more technical, the company anniversary, Design Our Intranet newsletter. So we are using something called audience targeting within SharePoint. And the reason why it's important, because most of the time, or what I've seen in some other implementations is we don't maximize the use of news in SharePoint. And it's quite important because every department should have, as I say at the beginning, the opportunity to share the news. However, all this news should bubble up to the landing page without any effort or technical effort from the implementation. And with that, I'm going to move to the next, I guess, part of the presentation, which is how we actually do this together. So if we go to the slide number 8, which is a quick process, and you probably are familiar with this roadmap, with this step-by-step. However, I just want to highlight the most important thing for us, because with this rapid deployment, or how we call it, is the baselines. The most important one is that we actually, when we put together the first deployment, we come up with a generic, but also tailored to your organization. We don't start from scratch. So we actually speeding up the process, and the first week and the second week, we already have something in place for you, which is a pilot or as a proof of concept that contains most of the organizations. We come up with the page templates, the sites, the navigation, and then we move forward faster. So the rest of the stuff is about the governance, which is we decide of the information architecture, how it's going to look like, and then we work with the change management portion to decide the governance around the information architecture. And by the end of the process, we work together on the go live launch. We have a checklist that we are, it's been working with us and for us for the last few implementation. It's always been successful, because we have a tailored elements of the checklist that are important for organization to announce that we're going to have a new intranet. And then, of course, we keep on working with the continuous improvement for business process automations, anything that can actually reduce the cost and the time from the organization. So I believe, and now in the next one, we're going to be talking about the governance, and that's why I think I'm going to let Agustin to share the importance of the governance for an intranet.
Thank you, Luis. Folks, I want to switch gears a little bit and tell you now a little bit of the things you should be mindful of. I think what we are seeing with SharePoint is that with great power comes great responsibility. The great thing about SharePoint is that it's a very flexible, as you can see, platform, and it gives you as a communications professional, as an IT person, the ability to make changes, to create the navigation, to add color, branding. I mean, it's literally very easy to do. But because it's so easy to do, it's also, it gives users a lot of responsibility. And we need to educate users on the things that they can and those things that they cannot do or that we wish they don't do, right? So governance really is about, we think about is striking the right balance between what we're giving, users the ability to do and those things that we put in place so that they can't change things or they can't do things that we don't want them. I think of governance, to put it simply, as a rules of the game, right? Think of soccer. If you have a soccer game without rules, it would be everyone kicking the ball in every direction. You wouldn't know what's happening. So we need to put a few rules of what's possible and what's not. And what we see when governance is not in place are some of these things. We see, too many sites being created, content that is outdated. So there's no revisions. There's version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of documents. We see that roles and responsibilities are not clear. So for example, site owners are not looking at their data. They're not refreshing content. They're not really considering that as part of their, responsibilities in essence, right? And then the other thing we see, and this is a real concern, is that security could be at risk because, for example, if somebody created a site and gave it certain permissions, it could happen that someone else finds content that they shouldn't, right? So We run into a lot of those problems in our experience. And so for that reason, we want to talk to you about the importance of governance. We did a survey in one of our clients, and in fact, and we asked them, if your intranet today could be improved, what would be the main things you would like to see? And the ones in red here are the ones that have to do with governance, navigation and organizational information. They wish that was more streamlined. Understanding better the what to use when, and permissions and security. You can see that it doesn't have so much to do with actual SharePoint. It's more about how we use SharePoint. That is a big problem for people sometimes. So again, more to the point, governance is something that you definitely want to think about when you're creating a SharePoint Online intranet. And what are things that you can ask yourself if you're wondering about governance? Here are some ideas. What content should we publish in the intranet, and what content we should not publish in the intranet? I'll give you a hint. You shouldn't publish meeting minutes. Why? Right? Unless there's a real use case for it, which is probably not. That should probably be more in the collaborative world. Or another example, there shouldn't be version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of a file in an intranet. Why should that be the case? When Luis was showing search, if I do a search and I find a version 3 of a file, can I trust that the documents are up to date? Probably not, right? So we don't want to have garbage in, garbage out, they say, right? Another example of governance is who can provision new sites and when. You may have run into this. People like sites because they just like them, because they want to have a presence. But is that a good reason to have a new site in the intranet? Or can your site be amalgamated with another site that already exists? And what is the process to request a new site? Will there be an approver for new sites on the intranet? Well, we strongly recommend that you have an approver, maybe corporate communications, maybe your marketing team, right? Because otherwise there'll be sites for everything, because people like, a presence on the intranet. So we need to be careful about that and have a process in place. Maybe there's a ticket to the service desk that then funnels a request for approval to corporate communications. Maybe there's a series of criteria the user should meet before the intranet site is provisioned. Another thing that we touched on was consistency. Is very important that all your sites have a similar layout, that the branding is in place, the sites look familiar, right? Because it then helps users find what they're looking for. Who will be accountable for the information on the intranet is another good question, right? What about news, global news, site news? What about information on department sites, right? Probably site owners. And then last but not least, will the intranet content ever be removed, or does it need to be retained forever? Will you have specific classifications of content? Microsoft allows you to classify content. For example, if you have SIN numbers, or if there's anything that is meant to be kept very, very secure, you can add classifications. So these are some questions, and there's many more, folks. But again, with great power, with SharePoint comes a lot of responsibility. So we do want to have certain conversations as we roll out our intranet. We're getting to the end. We want to share some user adoption tips. This was something that you mentioned was important to you. From our perspective, we always think, start small and prove your value. SharePoint can be a big change for a lot of people, especially people that are coming from file servers. You're suddenly exposing them to tagging files and uploading files to the cloud, and the what's to use when, and SharePoint and OneDrive. So it could be daunting. So sometimes we suggest that you start in phases. For example, one of our clients started with office workers only, and they only after they proved value with the office workers, they moved to hourly. So there's maybe a rollout approach that you can take from corporate, or perhaps you can choose a department. For example, HR communications are two of the departments that are most likely to be first. So think about how you want to roll it out before you actually embark in this project. And list champions early. One of the key roles that are, in my opinion, a make it or break it for intranets are champions of sites, essentially. So the people that populate these sites that Luis was sharing. Why are they so important is because they are the ones that will tell you what content needs to go in their department sites. They're likely going to do a little bit of a purging of data. They're going to clean up, and they're going to have to learn how to upload the data and tag it appropriately so that it shows in search and all that. And so you'll want to work with them from early on, and perhaps even their managers, to make sure that they allocate time for the project. Simplicity is critical. I would say make your intranet as simple to understand and navigate as possible. Let people give you feedback and make some adjustments. And then, of course, coach, communicate. You can never communicate enough, and train. Why I say coach is sometimes it's not about training. Sometimes it's about working with users to understand what they need and solution with them. But of course, there are other people will need training as well. So you can do live sessions. We do coaching sessions. We have sometimes assigned training online to them. You may also do a scavenger hunt to get people to, look for things on the intranet, and you're inviting them to essentially try it, but at the same time give you feedback. So these are some user adoption tips. I hope they're useful to you. One note that I want to make about training is that not everyone should be trained the same things. You have different personas or user groups on an intranet. The site owners have certain needs. Office workers and frontline workers may have different needs. So think about the needs of your users before you plan your training, and make sure that it's not just generic SharePoint training, that it includes their processes, right, and the things that that they need to do. Over to you, Luis, again.
Thank you, Agustin, and thanks for sharing. So we got 6 minutes left, so we're gonna leave some time for questions and answers. So I'm gonna just be very brief with this. In sum, the most important things for me are the two things. Before you actually get started with your intranet, work with your team, design and define your MVP. In other words, your minimum viable product. Answering questions like, if we were to launch our intranet today, what would I like to see? What is the most important? Maybe news, maybe the policies, and maybe just the search. That's the most, and as Agustin mentioned before, start small. Don't try, I remember the intranet is always going to be an organic and an ongoing project, right? Its information is always dynamic, and it's always creating content for the organization, because it's a face of the public internal face of your organization to your staff. And the second and the important one is, don't underestimate the importance of your information security. In these days, as Microsoft is driving the path to artificial intelligence, and other words, you probably heard this a few times, Copilot, it's super important that you are very conscious about your security and how you are managing your information. Because with the new tools, this information could actually be easily accessible for or by anyone if you don't plan the information security. What about you, Agustin?
Well, I guess I would reiterate the governance, folks. Again, the beauty of SharePoint is you can do a lot, but at the flip side, users can do a lot of damage too. Think about this. A site owner, someone that owns a site, could accidentally delete a site if they were not trained well enough, and suddenly a site would disappear, right? It's recoverable, but they can do it. So there's a lot of chances of mistakes. So setting up the governance and then training and engaging users early on in the process is super critical. Folks, we will leave you with a lot of really good resources, from templates that you can extract from Microsoft, to a theme generator that shows you how to create brand standards for your intranet, to resources around governance and user adoption, as well as a way to stay in touch with all things Microsoft. Microsoft is making upgrades to SharePoint on an ongoing basis. Soon you will have the ability, for example, to create pages in SharePoint using AI. So there's all these really cool things that are coming. So definitely encourage you to check out the roadmap and the blog and so on. With that, we want to thank you so much for being here and open it up for questions. I'm sure there's some questions out there. Any things that we've touched upon that you would like to know more of and we can help you with? You can post them in the chat if you prefer. Excellent. Well, if you do have any questions, don't feel shy to ask. We're always here, and send us a note. I hope this was useful to all of you. We sincerely, I think, love this subject and shared as much as we could from our experiences. Luis, thanks so much again for helping me with this. Any final questions, comments before we adjourn?
Thank you as well, Agustin. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's always, I guess, as Microsoft sharing is caring. We are here to share as well our experience, and we hope as well by that this is helpful as well. And anytime we are here to help.
Cheers, folks. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.